young child will use his parents as a model. He will copy the way they speak, the way they move, and even the way they think. But more importantly, he or she will absorb their hurts, unsolved wounds, and the defense mechanism as their own, as well as repeating the mistake without even realizing it as a self-fulfilling prophecy, just because a child has always a very deep sense of loyalty towards his parents. And it is in fact one of the first lessons that the Osfour Self-Coaching Model is teaching us, which is whatever unsolved wound you carry, you will automatically pass them on to the next generation through your belief system and your behaviors. And this is how generations of people in the same family structure can experience over and over the same kind of situation, problems, and even struggle throughout their whole life. In those cases, we can then literally talk about transgenerational trauma. And often children end up with the daunting task to resolve and heal the wounds that their parents have not been able to sort out themselves. In this new episode, we will be able to witness what are the actual consequences of unhealed wounds that are passed on to the next generation. But before we start, let's first find out what is the Osfour Self-Coaching Model. You ready? Let's do it!
Hello everyone, this is Sophia Osfour and welcome on my masterclass on healing wounds with the Osfour Self-Coaching Model. Before we start, let's first understand what is a model. In psychology, a model is referred as a theory or process that is either created to understand a mechanism or to solve a precise problem, such as the work of Byron Katie, which is made out of 4 powerful questions that helps you change your belief system. The next question you're probably wondering about is what is the Osfour Self-Coaching Model then? The Osfour Self-Coaching Model is a process, a set of habits and principles, and a tool. But the best way to describe it would be to simply say that it is a daily practice. As a process, it is designed to transform negative experiences into powerful life lessons and help you heal them. As a set of habits and principles, it teaches you how you can recycle your negative experiences to drastically increase your self-awareness and enhance the quality of your communication, as well as using those experiences as a springboard for you to learn, grow, and evolve. As a tool, it provides you with a powerful set of principles that, and when combined with the sets of habits and the process itself, becomes a very sophisticated tool that ultimately allows you to self-coach yourself on the spot in order to manage and face the daily challenges of your life in a more efficient, powerful, and peaceful way. Now, I know what you're going to say to me. Sophia, that all sounds very important and interesting, but what do you mean exactly? Let me break it down to you. You know how sometimes you're going through a very difficult situation and the only question you have in your head over and over is, why me? And don't you agree that negative experiences can be sometimes so challenging that it feels as though you're dragging them years and years after you've experienced them? Well, what you probably don't know is that the reason you drag them is because you have not been able to process them properly, digest them, forgive them, and ultimately learn the lesson they had to teach you. Oh yes, because I forgot to tell you, but all the bad experiences that you're going through in your life, well, they're not just there to hurt you, but in fact to teach you a very important lesson you need to learn in order to grow. And spoiler alert, guys, but that is one of the purpose of life. I'm just saying. So, in other words, the better you get at digesting those experiences and of course learning from them, the easier your life is going to be. So I'm guessing that at this point, your next question is, what would I really benefit from learning the Osfour Self-Coaching Model? Okay, that is a fair question. But before I tell you that, let me first say this. One of the most disturbing assumptions that is made in our society, and that I personally always thought to be not only strange, but also seriously disempowering, is the fact that people take for granted that because you are a human being from day one, that obviously means that you know and understand everything that is happening inside your inner world, which is simply not true. The reality is that most of us operate at a basic and reactive level because we are on autopilot mode, unconscious of what is really happening into our inner world. We react and respond to outside stimuli without having a clear understanding of why we feel or act the way we do, simply because we have never been taught how to inquire about it. But moreover, because even if we knew about it, what are we supposed to do with it? So the benefit of learning the Osfour Self-Coaching Model is that it gives you the knowledge, tools, and skills you need to be mindful of yourself, where you can anticipate, understand, and control what is happening into your inner world. But more importantly, deal with it. The model is designed to provide you with a clear and simple process and give you the tools to self-coach yourself in order to operate in a more efficient way at 3 constant levels that most people struggle with in their daily life, which is what you experience, how you experienced it, and how you respond to it. In this masterclass, I'm teaching you the basic of the Osfour Self-Coaching Model through study cases of famous people. Together, we are going to analyze what are the negative experiences they faced and how they could digest, learn, and heal them if they had the Osfour Self-Coaching Model. The model is made out of 3 layers. The process, which is the 4 different steps that the model is made of. The postures, which is the attitude that you will need to develop to go through the process. And finally, the postulas, which are, if you will, the rules that structure the model. Here in this masterclass, you will be taught the process and the postures. And if you're interested to work with me on one-to-one and learn the whole Osfour Self-Coaching Model, go on my website to see my coaching package, or contact me directly via my email address to book your 30 minutes free discovery session. You'll find both the link below this video. Finally, keep in mind that although the Osfour Self-Coaching Model is a very powerful tool, it is not designed to work on traumatic experiences or for people with mental issues. For those things, we advise you to seek other type of support.
I think that when it comes down to transgenerational trauma, one could not find a better example than Mary Tudor, the only child of Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon. Nor could I find a better study case to talk about the Osfour Self-Coaching Model and the importance of making sure that you are digesting and in fact healing the difficult experiences that you're going through, because otherwise they will be passed on to the next generation. And despite what history said about Bloody Mary, I think she was just deeply hurt, and hurt people hurt. The amount of wound that her parents passed to her was way too much for her to solve all of them on her own, so instead, all she could do was to be loyal to them. This is the story of Mary Tudor.
Mary Tudor was born on 18 February 1516. She was the only child of Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon to survive infancy, and therefore the sole and true heir of the throne of England. Sadly, in 1533, after a 6 years battle with her first wife, Henry VIII will officially manage to get the annulment of his marriage with Catherine, making her instantly an illegitimate child, which means that at 17 years old, Mary Tudor will lose everything. Her titles, her status, but worst of all, Henry will forbid her to have any contact with her mother until her death. From that point on, Mary will be relegated to the position of a simple nanny, first for Elizabeth and later on for her brother Edward. Finally, on the 1st of October 1553, after 20 years of humiliation, Mary will finally ascend on the throne of England as the first Queen Regnant. At 37 years old, one of her first acts as a queen was to cancel the annulment of her parents' marriage. She will also attempt to restore the Catholic faith as the main religion, but sadly her method and even her fanaticism will very quickly raise a huge resentment among the population. Indeed, during her 5 years of reign, around 280 Protestants will be burned at stake for refusing to convert to Catholicism, and another 800 will flee the country. Those religious persecution will later on in history earn her the nickname of Bloody Mary. Her legacy will also be further tainted by the loss of Calais, England's last land in Europe, to the French during her reign. In 25 July 1554, Mary and Philip, a young Spanish prince, 11 years younger than her, will be wed at the Winchester Cathedral in a lavish ceremony. And in September 1554, Mary stopped menstruating. She gained weight and felt nauseated in the morning. Sadly, this will only be the sign of a false pregnancy. A couple of years later, in 1557, exactly the same situation will happen, and once again, no baby will be born. Broken-hearted and in fact exhausted by such a challenging life, Mary will start to show the obvious sign of uterine cancer. She will die on the 17th November 1558 at the age of only 42 years old.
As you already know, the second layer that this model is made of are 5 postures that you will need to develop in order to start this healing journey. But first of all, let's understand what is a posture. A posture is a particular approach or attitude that allows one to tackle a situation in the most efficient way possible. The key on developing those postures is to practice them on a daily basis. You will also see that one of the benefits of the Osfour Self-Coaching Model is that the very nature of those 5 postures will tremendously enhance the quality of your communication. Those 5 postures are benevolence towards yourself and others, empathy, compassion, active listening, and the coach posture. Now, let's take a moment to understand each of those postures and how to apply them on your daily life. What is benevolence? Benevolence is the ability to be kind and gentle in the way you approach yourself and others. Having benevolence towards yourself and others is the keystone of any kind of self-work, especially when you are stepping into a healing process. However, it must be practiced every day. How can you practice it on a daily basis? Abolish once and for all negative and unproductive self-criticism, self-depreciation, self-sabotage behavior, and any kind of judgment. Instead, practice welcoming yourself and others as they are and loving, caring, appreciating yourself unconditionally. What is empathy? Empathy is the ability to sense other people's emotions, coupled with the ability to imagine what someone else might be thinking or feeling. To develop that tool will help you to have a wider understanding of a situation because you're not just stuck into your point of view. The best way to practice empathy is by asking yourself why people do what they do. Try to understand their motivations, their goals, and therefore their point of view without any judgment on your part. What is compassion? Compassion literally means to suffer together. Among emotion researchers, it is defined as the feeling that arises when you are confronted with another's suffering or feel motivated to relieve that suffering. How can you practice it on a daily basis? Since compassion is the ability to recognize a problem and act upon it, the number one act of compassion must be for yourself, which means that you must practice not doing necessarily what is easy, but what is right for you to do. What will benefit you in the long run instead of allowing yourself to be trapped into impulsive behaviors? Other act of compassion can simply be to help a perfect stranger. What is active listening? Active listening is a communication skills that involves going beyond simply listening to the words that another person speaks, but also seeking to understand the meaning and intent behind them. It requires being an active participant in the communication process, but moreover, absolute presence in the moment. How can you practice it on a daily basis? Most people are capable to listen, yet it takes an incredible level of self-discipline to hear people. So, in order to practice it, listen people without judging, without allowing your own perception, beliefs, and projection to get involved into the conversation, but instead silence yourself to the point where you can welcome what they are saying and therefore hear and understand what they want to express or what they need to express. What is a coach posture? The posture of a coach is of one where you ask yourself powerful, open questions that allows you to get in touch with the core of how you feel or what do you think. How can you practice it on a daily basis? Here are a couple of powerful open questions. How do I feel? What makes me feel that way? What has triggered this emotion in me? How can I change those feelings? What is important for me in this situation? What can I learn from this?
The first part of this model, what you want to understand is always the same, which is what was the perception that was triggered by your brain when you faced the experience that you have chosen to work on. Because keep in mind, the first perception is a key in order to understand the impact of that experience in your life. But more importantly, it is a great indicator of the wound that you carry and that needs to be healed. Because also remember, what is really hurtful about an experience is not the experience itself, but in fact the perception that you have of that experience. The structure that the model invites you to follow is made out of 5 steps: perception, thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and behaviors. Your perception is basically the view angle in which your brain chooses to see this situation. Your thoughts are what you're thinking about whenever you're thinking about this experience. Your emotion is how you feel when you think about this situation. Your beliefs are the conclusion that you came up about the cause, the meaning, or the limitation that this experience is teaching you. And finally, your behavior is how do you behave when you believe this or that about yourself or this situation.
Okay guys, so I just want to remind you that you have a free worksheet that goes with this masterclass. You can find the link below this video. And in this, you have the 4 steps of the model. So download it, it's free, and it allows you to learn in a much easier way how to apply the model to your own life. Okay, so now in regard to Mary Tudor and her perception, it is my opinion that her perception of this whole situation was of someone who felt completely 100% humiliated. And I have to say to you, it's very difficult not to feel humiliated, I think, in her position, because this was someone who was at the top of the ladder. She was the heir of the throne of England, and from one day to another she was nothing more than an illegitimate child. I mean, I don't know if you imagine, but that means that even servant who used to work for her was in a higher position than she was, because at least their father recognized her. Now she was being put in a position where her father is basically saying, well, you know, I don't recognize you. You're not my child. You know, you are a child, but you're not my child. And that puts her in a position that I can't even imagine being from there to there. How that is feel. You know, I can't even imagine that. But also, you know, let's not forget that she was living in a time where the status of people was very important. Like when you were wealthy at that time, you would wear clothes, specific clothes. You would wear specific colors, for instance. And so it's a time in the world where people believe a lot about that. I'm not saying nowadays it's still not like that, but it's not so obvious, you know. So in that time, for instance, you know, the jewelry that you wear, your status was very important. Who you are, what your parents are, the job you're doing, all of this somehow fed the concept and the idea that you're more valuable, right? And so for her to lose all of that would have put her in a position where she felt, in my opinion, no other emotions than being humiliated. That would be her first perception, in my opinion. So in terms of thoughts, what could have been triggered by the idea of feeling humiliated, you know? Obviously, in my opinion, you know, the kind of thought that would come in her head is that I'm not valuable, I'm not recognized, I'm not good enough, I'm an illegitimate child now, I have lost everything. Those would have been the kind of thoughts, in my opinion, that could have been in her head. And what could have been the emotions that those thoughts would have created? I think that, and I think it's even historically speaking, it's showing, you know, sadness, anger, resentment. Those are the basic emotions, but I think mostly sadness, you know. And remember that emotions are very important because they are the way that our body is expressing, you know, a message to us. And so sadness is a message that is here to say, I have lost something that was important for me and now I'm feeling sad. Anger is a feeling that is there to tell you someone has passed my boundaries and, you know, I need to do something. I need to let them know that this is not okay. And I think that in her case, what is really also sad is because the person who has inflicted her all of that is her father. And her father is not just any person. He's on top of being her father, he's the king. And so she was being put in this position, which no child should be put in a position, especially, is that she had, almost to choose side between two people she loved very much. And obviously in her case, she chose the side of her mother, but she was not really allowed to do that. And her father would resent her very much to take the side of her mother. So it almost feels as though he's trying to punish her. And one of the way he punishes her is that he puts her completely on the side. He took her mother, threw her in some castle far away. She was not allowed to see her mother. Even after she died, she was still not allowed to see her mother. And he also did the same with her. And Harry will completely refuse to allow her back in his life, sort of speaking, until she would agree to sign a document that will state that she's accepting and she's agreeing to the fact that she's an illegitimate child, basically, and her the marriage of her parents was invalid. That's it. And there will be a big fight between he and she until at some point she's going to submit, right? And so what happens is that, in my opinion, what you see in her whole life is that all of those feelings, all of this emotion, which she was not allowed to express because the person who was doing all of this was her father and the king, at some point, after 20 years of all of that, when she finally got to the position where she was a queen, it all exploded, like boom. And this is when you see her receiving this nickname later on in life, as Bloody Mary, because you see her wanting, going in this crazy quest of restoring Catholic religion in her country, up to the point where anyone who doesn't want to submit to that religion, they're going to get burned. That's it. And it's been said, in history that London city would smell like, burned skin for days and days, because she would take I don't know how many people all be burned at the same time. And you could see the smoke miles away. And in my opinion, this is the physical expression of someone who had to held so much anger, so much emotion, and suddenly she's in this position of power and boom, she just expressed, and it's almost as if by doing those things, by trying to hurt some other people in some way, she's saying to the whole world, I have been hurt. It was not okay. I'm not okay with that, And that, of course, I wouldn't want to be one of those people, certainly not. And I'm not saying it was correct or anything, but I feel for her, And it really shows when emotions are held on and stored in your body and boiling in your body for a long time. Those could be the results of what happened. Now, after emotions, what are the kind of beliefs that could have been triggered, in my opinion, based on this situation she was experiencing? I mean, obviously, this was somebody who came very quickly on with the conclusion that she had completely no value. And it's interesting because her mother probably came up, in my opinion, with the same kind of conclusion. But in her case, I almost want to say, what kind of other conclusion she could come up with? One day, she was seen as this very important person. People would bow to her. Some people could not even talk to her, or they had to ask someone to even, be in the same room as her. And one day to another, she loses everything. It's been said, that at the age of 2 years old, she was already married off. And the moment she lost her titles and her status, nobody wanted to get married. Now she's not interesting anymore, right? And so I think that one of the core beliefs that she probably had or the conclusion that she came up with, is that I'm not valuable. right? The second belief system, in my opinion, that she has internalized is I'm not good enough. And this is very much connected to what, in my opinion, her father already carried as a belief system. But in her case, was also emphasized by the fact that, listen, back in England, there was no law against the fact that a woman becomes a queen as her own. There was no law against that. But it was just in the mind of people where they thought, well, we could have a queen, but it would be better to have a man. It would be better to have a king. And so, even though, Henry VIII and Mary will have a very close connection, he was very proud of her, and at some point she even had her own castle, her own court, and she was sent off in castle, I forgot the name, but and she was like having her own court and basically practicing what a king is supposed to do, and she was good at it, and Harry was really proud of it. She was a savvy student, she was very smart basically. Yet none of that was valued in the mind of Harry, and he still was working his way to have a male heir, up to the point where now he's making this child completely illegitimate and still, sending her mother away, getting married to another woman, killing her because she's not giving him the male heir, then getting married off with another one. I mean, all of that, for me, it's impossible that she has not internalized the idea, I'm not good enough, because I'm doing all of this and I am all of that and I'm giving it to you, and somehow you still want a male heir. And finally, in my opinion, the third belief system, or the third conclusion that she came up with, was that she was probably not worthy. She was not worthy as a person. And it could also come up with this idea of, listen, what happened to her was something that nobody has ever seen. Nobody has ever seen. And you might think, how unlucky you must be to have a father like that and having a situation like that. And so, in my opinion, very quickly, the idea of I'm not lucky, all of those things only happened to me, could have also come as a conclusion. It's kind of a logical thing, because when you see the state of her life from that point to the point she dies, I mean, it is really a sad story. Finally, in terms of behaviors, what could, in my opinion, I can't really call, that she had like behaviors. She was just suffering what was happening. Like, she didn't act on it because, first of all, she was too young. I don't think she had the tools, and I don't think, in fact, anyone could have the tools at that time to survive what she had to go through without trauma. Like, I don't think anyone could strive through that. I don't think so. So basically what happened is that very quickly she started to showing sign of diseases. So, when you are not allowed to express your pain, as she was, at some point your body is going to express it for you, right? That's it. Because remember, one of the reasons that is so important to heal the wounds that you have is because if you don't heal them, you're storing them. You're storing the emotions that are connected to them, right? And that's exactly what's happening with her. So at some point she's in the situation, she cannot express her feelings, so the body is speaking, right? And what happens? First of all, she completely loses her appetite, and very quickly people would say that she's almost anorexic. The second is that she would lose her menstruation, will be completely irregular throughout her whole life, and often will be very painful. At the end of her life, will we really understand how far this thing with the menstruation is gonna go. And she will show sign of depression, sadness, despair. I mean, you name it, but basically you could see that this is someone who suffers anxiety, depression, loneliness, to be forced, as she was, to not being able to be in contact with your mother. When you're a teenager, you still need your parents, and to suddenly be sent away on your own. It's a very traumatic thing, and obviously, sign of depression. I think they're normal, to be honest, when you regard what happens here.
On the second part of this model, what you're looking for is always the same. 1. What is the core wound that have driven your action? 2. How did you take part on this experience to be the way it has been? 3. What are the action or lack of action that made this experience the way it was? The structure that the model invites you to follow is made out of 5 steps: shadow, distinguishment, quality of answer, positive attention, and pattern. Your shadow is the part of you that you suppress because you don't like it or because they were not accepted by your environment. The more comfortable you will be about facing, confronting, accepting, and even embracing your shadow, the more you will be able to recycle your negative experiences into tools for you to grow and evolve in your life. Distinguishment is your ability to tell the difference between what belongs to you, such as your thoughts, your emotions, your projections, your perceptions, your behaviors, and your belief, and what belongs to the other person. Very often in life, people will try to make you responsible for stuff that belongs to them, as well as you might be tempted to do the same, and that is why it is so important for you to learn to tell the difference between those two. Your quality of answer is your ability to assess the quality of your reply in regard to the situation, which is a key skill in life, because let's remember that the more negative is your perception of a situation, the less you will have access to resources and your resourcefulness. Your positive attention is the core reason that pushes one to do something, especially when that thing is not necessarily good for them. As long as what you're doing is giving you more than what you're losing, no matter how negative it is on the long run, you will keep on doing it. So understanding your positive attention is very important because it is what drives you, but it is also very important information when you want to understand someone else's behavior. Your pattern is situation, behaviors, or people that reoccur in your life again and again, which are an extraordinary clues that something needs to be changed.
For this second part of finding out her wounds, okay, so the shadow that we're looking for is the wound, and the wound is answering this simple question: what is it exactly about this whole situation that hurts you so much? And in my opinion, this is very much connected to her own beliefs, right? Because the conclusion that you came up with are often basically the core wound that is hurting you about this situation. And in her case, I mean, she got it all. One, you have the idea that, in my opinion, one of her core wound is, I'm not valuable, right? And like I said about the beliefs is exactly, how could she not believe that? How could this hurt was not created based on the situation that she had? It would have taken a very sophisticated human being with tremendous knowledge and understanding of who they are for them to go through what she has been through and not having that wound being created of, I'm not valuable. Who, as I am me, by myself, without my title, without my look, without my this, I'm valuable. To be honest, we're talking here about the core of a wound, in my opinion, that 99.99% of human beings have unless you have done some work on you. The second wounds that, in my opinion, you found in her situation is, once again, I said it, but the fact of not feeling good enough, right? And once again, when you see the situation that she had with her father and what happened, and the fact that even though she could have been the queen of this country, somehow she was not good enough for her father. Somehow a boy was better. And finally, the third wound would have been, I'm not worthy, right? So I think that in here we're gathering some of the worst wounds that you could have as a human being, you know. Believing that you're not good, that you're not valuable is extremely painful. Believing that you're not valuable, but on top of it, not good enough, it's also very painful. But on top of it, believing that you're not valuable, you're not good enough, and you're not worthy, when you see the state of her life after that, you're not surprised, right? Because all of those three things are things we need as a human being. It's a need. We need to feel valuable. We need to feel good enough. And we need to be worthy. You can't have anything valuable in your life unless you feel worthy of it. And if you might have it, you're going to lose it very quickly. That's as simple as that. And her life is going to show that. Because once she finally become a queen, what did she do? She almost self-destruct what she probably dreamed to have for those 20 years that passed in this situation. Now, when it comes down to distinguishment, remember that this is always a very important part, because this is a part where you're like, okay, this belongs to me, this belongs to you, this belongs to you, this belongs to you. Because listen, life is hard enough with your own stuff. Okay, so there's no reason for you to carry the stuff of other people. Already, you know, in a relationship between two adults, it should be like that. I take my stuff, you take your stuff. But as a child, it's even more like that. But in her case, she doesn't take that. You know, she doesn't have distinguishment. She take all the stuff. And in a way, to be fair to her, it's not only that she takes it, but it's also that her parents are dropping that on her. You know, because they are not able, for the reason that, you know, if you've seen the previous video, you already know, so we're not here to judge them as a parent, but because they were not able to have access to their own resourcefulness, so instead they just on defense mechanism and autopilot mode. And so she learns that, but because now it's not only my stuff, it's also your stuff that drops, she's also on autopilot and a defense mechanism. But I want to take a moment and really distinguish what belongs to her, what belongs to them. Obviously, the fight that they had with each other was completely 100% their thing. But she was not able to distinguish that, so she took that, and not only she took that, but she took the side of her mother, which is understandable. It is very painful for any child to see his mother suffer, of course, because your mom is your mom, special. I'm not saying that or not, but I'm just saying. But it's even worse when the cause of the suffering is your father. But ultimately, you know, she should have separate herself because it was too heavy to carry. You see, her mother was, you know, was unable to hear her father. Her father was unable to hear what the mother had to say, or disagreement, or the love that she had for him. And ultimately, she was being put in the middle. And in many, many ways, I have to say that when it comes down to Henry VIII and the behavior that he had with his wife, you know, it's I could find an understanding in many ways. And I have in the previous video that I have. But I have to say, when it comes down to his daughter, I think what he did is outrageous, because it almost feels as though he's so angry with Catherine, and because he doesn't have Catherine to, you know, to make her suffer, but he did as much as he could, but because he could not go further, so it's almost as if he's using her own daughter, to take it on her, you know. She's almost become the punching ball of this guy, you know, and that is just not okay. One of the reasons also, I think he's like that, I'm not excusing it, but I'm thinking, is because in terms of behaviors and strategies, she uses exactly the same as her mother. You see, when Henry VIII wanted to divorce, what is it that Catherine did? She was stubborn, and she was like, I'm not divorcing, this is not okay, I'm going to fight till the end. And she did. But in the end, he won, and he smashed it, you know, because he was not a very merciful man. And he does exactly the same, because she also, for month and month and month, it's been said that her father was like, listen, if you want to come back in my life, I want you to sign this document that says you are agreeing to the fact that you're an illegitimate child and that the marriage with your mother was completely not valued, basically. And just like her mother, she was stubborn, and she fought and she fought and she fought. And in the meantime, she was pushed in a corner, and, you know, until in the end, she had to sign. And I said this in the previous video, right, about Catherine. I think she lacked strategy, like purely politic strategy, because she's not just the wife of any guy, she's the wife of a king. And we're talking here about politics more than anything else. So, you know, I how can I say, I admire, you know, the level of loyalty and I guess sense of honor that Mary had, but she was not very strategic about this thing, because her father had all the power. What does it cost you to sign a piece of paper, even though you're not agreeing with it, because you know that as long as this guy doesn't have this paper, he's gonna go on you, right? And I think in that sense, Catherine was not a very good leader for her daughter in that regard, because she just copied what her mother did, right? You're stubborn, I'm gonna also be stubborn. But it didn't work. And I said, you know, this on the previous video, the fourth wife of Henry, you know, Mary of Clèves, I think. I've got a blank now. But anyway, when he got married with her, he complained because she was so ugly. He didn't want to stay married with her and he wanted to divorce. You know, this one, she was clever. She was like, okay, you want to divorce me? For sure. But she signed all the paper and he gave her all the money and they even became friends. So this guy was just a guy who wanted to be right. That's it. And when he wants to be right, he's going to submit and he's going to push and he's going to do everything in his power, and he has all the power to do it. Why don't you just sign and leave it alone? She doesn't do that, and I think in that sense she just copied, as I said, the method of her mother, which was not very good for her. But I admire, once again, I'm going to say that, I admire her loyalty and her sense of honor, because I think she had a profound sense of honor, in my opinion. So this was the part that belongs to her father, which was his behavior towards that child was out of order. There's nothing you can find behind this guy, honestly, besides the fact that he was in lots of pain, and people on pain do lots of hurting. But it would have been amazing for her to completely detach herself from all this stuff. That doesn't belong to me. This is not mine. And you know, it's very empowering. That's one of the things this is part of the model that I love so much, you know. It's very empowering to separate the stuff. Yeah, this I take because it's mine, but this is not mine, this is not mine, this is not mine. Because it feels much lighter, you know, and I would invite anyone to do that. Another thing I think, in my opinion, she could have, and in fact she should have separated herself from, is all this story that, you know, her mother had about this child, you know, this heir that she had to produce, you know, because I think that she absorbs so much the pain of her mother of not being able to provide this heir, that this pain, this suffering, this inability, I would almost say, became her own. And how, you know, what makes me conclude that is the historical fact. You know, when finally she got married, she got pregnant, or people thought so. It took, I think, 9 months. You know, and they sent her in some play in some castle, protected her, because at that time there's like a certain protocol when a future queen is pregnant. And 9 months they're waiting for this baby. She's got all the symptom of a pregnant woman, and suddenly they realize 10 months pass, no baby. 11 months, no baby, and they had to come up with the conclusion that there is no baby, there's just a fake pregnancy, and that must have been so painful. I can't even imagine. It's bad enough, to get pregnant and to lose the baby, but in a way you could always like let it go and be like, that's destiny, that's life, it's not my fault. But in her case, she got pregnant, she got all the symptoms, no baby. And I think, in my opinion, it's because she's absorbed so much of the pain that was about not being able to provide this male heir, right? And this would have been something really good to separate herself. And in fact, what's also interesting is that this big thing about having a baby, right, about having a male heir, about producing that child, was so traumatic, obviously for Catherine, obviously for all the women who had to go through the situation with Harry, because they were like expected to provide a male heir and they haven't been able, like Anne Boleyn. But also for the children, her, and finally Elizabeth. And I already mentioned that, but Elizabeth is like, okay, I'm gonna become a queen, but I'm not getting married and I'm not having children. That's it. This is a business I don't want even to deal with. And in my opinion, it's because what Harry did was, and also probably, you got to think at that time for a woman, having a baby, an healthy baby, having a pregnancy, a good pregnancy, was already 50% a death warranty. But when the pregnancy stillborn, or and there's any kind of complication, we've seen it with Jane Seymour, finally the famous woman who's going to provide Henry VIII with a male heir, she's going to die. That's it. And so it was a difficult business for women, to be pregnant, plus the stress and the aggression of this entire society who's assuming in their head, it is you did something wrong. You didn't provide me with a male heir because of. Now, listen, later on in history, now we know that it is the husband, it is the male that provides the sex of the child. It's not the woman. So, hello. But anyway, I think that this would have been a good thing for her to completely detach herself. It would have been, but obviously it was not, right? So this would have been the things that was this, that belonged in my opinion with her parents. All the behaviors, all the defense mechanism, being stubborn, being outrageously controlling like her father. And this is a third thing, which is, I think, is very important to mention also. Is one thing to go through pain. Pain can be an amazing teacher, but sometimes you can go through pain and learn zero. And in her case, that's what we see. We see that for 20 years, from the moment her parents are marriage is annulled to the moment she sit on the throne of England, you think this one is going through so much suffering, and you think she learned. But what you realize is that based on her action, she learns zero. She becomes exactly her father. That's it. When she goes in this quest of forcing people, to submit to her religion, right? What she thinks she's right? Like her father, when he thinks he's right, that's it. I want you to do that, no matter what, no matter how. I don't care what I need to do. This is exactly what she does. She repeats that. And then she burns everybody. This, to me, belongs to her 100%. Because what it means is that you have been through the suffering and you repeated the same. Now, is one thing. For Henry VIII, he's the first layer of that thing. I'm not excusing him, but I'm like, you're in lots of pain, you're the first one. But in her case, she has seen in her heart, in her soul, in her body, what it feels like when someone is so powerful that they get drunk with power and they start to abuse everybody with that power. Yet, the first second, right, someone hand her that power, she goes and she does exactly the same to someone weaker than her. Out of order, absolutely out of order. So, what's the point? You may suffer from the behavior of your father, but you've learned nothing. And that belongs to her 100%. I think this is the part that is a bit disappointing. And so there's a good lesson here to learn, because often people have the idea that, when you suffer, you're wiser. Not necessary. There are some people who go through terrible situation and they walk out, right, and go and do exactly the same to someone else, which means they've learned nothing. Yet in her case, during these 20 years, through all of this that she has been through, she could have learned so much. And once again, we can compare her to Elizabeth. Elizabeth has suffered, but not as much as she did. But I'm certain she has suffered without a doubt. But Elizabeth didn't have, this time where, she can remember time where she was considered the heir of the throne of England. She was much older when all of this disappeared. On the other hand, in her case, on the other hand, for Elizabeth, she was very young. She was a baby almost, so can't remember that. So I think the fall was not as high, and I think that's what makes the difference, in my opinion anyway, although we're not comparing pain. But this is also what you see about Elizabeth is that she's learning. She has learned. As soon as she sits on the throne of England, what is the first thing she says? She says, you know what? I'm the queen of this country, but it is not my business to tell people what to believe. That's it. Even though she's a Protestant and she prefer that people stays in this religion, she's not going to go and start to burn everybody. She has learned. Okay, so this was her part, right? She went through the pain, but she has not learned. Now, in regard to the quality of her response, obviously, listen, her response is an automated response, and basically she simply copied what she's seen. Her mother is going in stubborn mode, and she used certain strategies. She uses the same. Her father goes in controlling mode, overpowering mode. She absorbed all of that, and as soon as she's in a position, she repeats exactly that. There's no judgment to be made, but it shows that I think, the level of work that was expected of her, implicitly was too high. Like, it was just too much. What was her positive attention? To me, it's very clear that her positive attention, the number one positive attention that she has, is to restore the name of her mama. That absolutely, because one of the first acts that she does when she becomes queen is to cancel the annulment of her parents' marriage. So of course she does it for herself, because when her parents their wedding is not annulled, now she's not an illegitimate child anymore. But I think also was to restore the name of her mother. Like, she was not, because you've got to think at that time, what does it mean also for women when you have an illegitimate child? It means that you're a whore, basically, I don't like to say those words, but, that's it. That means you having sex with men without being married was like the worst things ever, especially when you're as religious as she was and her mother was. So it was probably like you couldn't find a higher insult for women, I think, at that time, until she restored that. No, she was a wife and your wife. Another thing, of course, overall, she was trying to heal, but she was so committed to the wounds that she lost, or she had not lost, but she got trapped into the wound. And this is the thing. When it comes down to healing, remember, I always repeat that the job of a wound is never to heal itself. That is your job, right? But sometimes you can be so focused on the wound that you lose unless you are like guided. That's why the model is amazing, because the model guides you, right? Because I've experienced that for myself. If you are so committed to the wound of what's hurting, it could literally drag you to more hurts. So in a way, it's like a vicious circle where the more wounded you are, the more committed you are to heal that wound, the more you're wounding yourself in some ways, right? And finally, in terms of pattern, okay, so it's very difficult to say what kind of pattern, she has in her life. But what I can see throughout her whole life is that there is really this, and you can see that she's internalized. That's why at the beginning of the video I said, in my opinion, she internalized the idea, I'm not lucky. That's it. Wait, these things only happen to me. Because her whole life is made out of one drama after the next one. Not one drama after the next one. One drama after the next one. And, I also want to add something, because I forgot to mention that, but I found it very important to mention. When I said at the beginning, that she was not feeling worthy. One of the good things where you can see, how she was not feeling worthy, and how, the belief that we internalize inside of us can make us do things where you think it's a choice, but really what you're only doing is serving the wound. That's what you're doing. When finally she became a queen, she was 37 years old. And, I said at some point in this video that she was already getting married off at the age of 2 years old, right? Because at that time she was considered valid, and I think she was 2 years old or 3 years old when she got married off with the future king of France. And then suddenly she's a legitimate child, she's not valuable anymore, and for 20 years I think there's barely one guy who's somehow interested in her, but not much more. Finally, at 37 years old, she wants to find a husband. And here's the interesting fact. She doesn't feel worthy, okay? Not worthy of love, right? So here's a woman who is at the most powerful position she gets. She can have any man she wants, and she just snaps her finger. And out of all the men she finds this guy from Spain, who is 26 years old, which is 11 years younger than her. And you got to understand, at that time, for a woman to be 37 years old, you're basically old. Yeah. Now, even today, this is like starting to stretch, but at that time, it was like 10 times worse, right? And she was not specifically pretty, because there has been in history women who had relationship with younger men, but they were extremely beautiful, right? It's not her case. And this is how you can see when someone is not, like the belief system that we carry. You think you're making choice, you don't. You're just serving the wind. So out of all the men she could find, she found this guy, 26 years old, and the guy, he's basically coming on a job. Someone told him, hey, listen, there's a position as a future king, as a king, or wife of a queen. Are you interested? You're gonna get lots of money. You don't have much to do. Okay, why not? So here's this guy's coming, and he's not impolite to her. He bows, he speaks, he blah blah blah. But here's the thing. When this situation with the baby happened, the fake baby happened, and I can't even imagine how she felt when she had to leave the castle without a baby, and it's spread all around Europe that she thought she was pregnant, but she was not. So humiliating. You see how our perception keeps on reoccurring, how things repeating themselves. Now this guy, instead of staying with his wife, where he goes on war in somewhere, Spain or something, and he disappeared for 3 years. 3 years! Now, do you think that during these 3 years he was like faithful? Who believes that? And then he reappeared after 3 years. And unfortunately, same thing happens with a couple of months he's there. She thinks she's pregnant, but now everybody's much more careful. And 9 months later, they realize she's not pregnant, right? And that will be it for her, literally. And a couple of months after that, she started to show signs of ovarian cancer, and she's gonna die because this guy, as soon as the second baby, as soon as they're gonna understand that she's not pregnant, this guy is gonna leave, And what I'm saying is that this is where you think you're making choice, but you're serving your wound, right? Because once you have internalized a belief about you or about life or about your environment, you have no other option than serving that. And so out of all the men she found a man who made her feel unworthy. That's it. And that was the point I wanted to make.
On the third part of this model, what you are doing is gathering all the precious information that you have found during this process. It is a key moment into the recycling and transforming of the experience that you're working on. The holy grail of this whole process is always the same, which is the moment where you're going, wow, because you just had a realization. A realization is a lesson, and a lesson is what makes an experience move from useless to now useful. Yet a lesson will remain useless until you make sure that whatever you have learned, you embody in your life, your behaviors, and who you are as a person. However, you also need to have a clear plan on how you will behave the next time something similar will appear in your life, which means that you also need to have a proper goal setting. The structure that the model invites you to follow here is divided in 9 steps, who are divided in 2 parts. The first one is realization, lesson, and change. And the second part is a goal setting, which is made out of 5 coaching questions. What, why, how, inconvenient, and engagement. However, for this video, I will only talk about the first part of this process because the goal setting is something rather basic and you can find it in your worksheet. A realization is the coming of a deep and profound understanding of something about yourself, life, or other people. A lesson is something that instructs you or teaches you something about the experience that you're working on. In this process, a lesson is really important element because it is the one factor that makes the difference between a useless random experience that happens to me to a powerful, useful experience that I have attracted in my life to heal. As you can see, it's always about the perception. Finally, change. In order to make any impactful change in your life, you need to be clear about what you don't want, but moreover, about what you want to replace it.
Okay guys, so when it comes down to this third part of the model, what could have been the realization that Mary Tudor had? Obviously, as usual, I have no way to know that, but let's imagine that I do. And I think that, in my opinion, one of the good realization that she could have for her was to really, really understand that when you come from a family structure that was so toxic as she was, here's a child who is in the middle of not even a divorce, but worse than that, the annulment of a marriage, and having parents who are so busy fighting, doing their thing, serving their pain, serving their egos and whatever, that they forget that there's a child in the middle who's at the receiving end and who's got to watch 2 people that they're the most important people in her life, and they're fighting and probably pulling her from one side to another just to be right, just to have control over the other one. She's used, unfortunately, in that regard. And that, in my opinion, would have been a really good realization of being, what, this is where I come from, but this, I can't carry that because it's too heavy. It's just too heavy. No one can, it's, once again, I said that already. Life is tough enough on your own when you have to carry your own thing, carry your own bag, work on your own thing. But if on top of it you have the one of other people, even though they are the most important people of your life, somehow you have to say, you know what, this is too hard for me. I'm walking, I'm out of here, And that would have been a very powerful realization because, and I think maybe some people can relate, when you come from a structure, I don't know, you were beaten up by your parents, or you've been like through very toxic family structure, at some point, you gotta be able to drop it. That's it, right? Because otherwise, and that is a fact of, psychological fact, is that when you come from a structure, a family structure, right, you're gonna do two things. You're gonna either repeat what's been done, or you're gonna do the opposite. But either way, you're still trapped in it. And I think for me, based on that realization, one of the good lessons that she could have learned through these 20 years is to learn to be her own person, right? To really ask herself, okay, this is where I come from, okay, but it's not really working and I can't keep up with that and I don't want to be that and I don't want to do that. It's too much, too heavy. Who do I want to be, right? And this would have taken her into a journey of discovering herself, but also making herself. See, where she could have discovered that your value is not based on what the others, the outside world, but is based on who you make yourself, right? And this is something I often say as for myself, I say to people, and I often say to people, listen, it's very easy to be kind when life has been kind to you. It's another ball game when you remain a kind person even though life was not kind, because for that you need self-discipline. And for me, in my life, this model has helped me to go through very tough time, to have seen people doing things that I'm like, until this day, I'm like, really? Is this what you've just done? But at the same time, being able to learn from it, disagree from it, but learn from it, and forgive people and move on, right? And I think for her, this could have been an amazing opportunity, because I already said it, but I will say it again. This experience that she had could have been a gold mine of powerful lesson, not only as a human being, but also as a future queen. This whole experience could have made her one of the greatest queen that has ever walked on the earth, because there was plenty lesson about compassion, about love, about pain, about what do you do with the power. See, because there's one thing to complain about someone having the power and the way they abuse the power, but when you do have that power, what are you going to do with it? See, that's one thing. And what she shows is that she was suffering when someone was abusing power over her, but as soon as she had that power, she went on and did exactly the same with someone. That's it. So this would have been a great lesson, and there were probably many others that she could have learned. And finally, the last part for her, now that she had a realization, she had a lesson, what could have been the change? And I said it, I already started to say it. But to really sit down, especially when it comes from a toxic structure as she did, and say, okay, let me sit down and let me see, who do I want to be? And you see, this is one of the beauty about human being, is that we human being can be who we want to be, right? You may come from a structure where people are poor, or, they behave in a toxic way, but the beauty is that we can at any moment stop and decide, this is who I want to be. I want to be kind, I want to be successful, I want to be wealthy, and you've got no clue how, because you come from a structure that is poor, or where people are abusive. But through this desire, you learn, you can find the resources. And I think that for her, she had plenty of that. She had 20 years where she could have prepared herself to be the queen that I think she could have been. If she would have learned the lesson, and if she would have had the Osfour Self-Coaching Model, she could have been an amazing queen.
On the last part of this model, you basically set yourself free and close the door with everything that has happened and everyone involved in what happened. This is the part where you let go of all the emotion that you went through during this experience. Now, one could have the illusion that because this is the final part of this model, therefore it is not so important. Well, think again. This is still a very important moment indeed, because it is the time where you actually release the experience. The structure that the model invites you to follow is made out of 3 steps: acceptance, forgiveness, and the closure letter. But for the sake of this video, I will only speak about acceptance and forgiveness and not the closure letter, as it is a very intimate and yet basic exercise that you can find also on your worksheet. Acceptance in psychology is the fact that a person assents to a reality or a situation, recognizing a process or a condition, often negative or uncomfortable situation, without attempting to change it or protest it. Forgiveness is the process that one intentionally goes through in regard to a situation where he initially felt victimized or wrong in order to change his feeling and attitude regarding a given offender and overcome the impact of the offense, including negative emotions such as resentment, anger, or desire for vengeance, however justified.
Last part of the model, we're facing with acceptance, forgiveness, and the closure letter. Acceptance. You know, one of the things that I found so interesting about her story, and specifically, acceptance, is that, she's being put in a position that she clearly is in a complete state of non-acceptance. She's not accepting, the annulment of her parents. But who could blame her for that, right? She's put in a situation where she's got to accept a situation that puts her in the position where she's not even supposed to exist then. She's an illegitimate child. Why she should agree with that? And what I found interesting in here is that sometimes in life, you're going to be put in a position where you got to accept the situation because it is what it is, and at the same time, and this is a fine line, not submit to it, right? And in her case, she's not accepting it, but she's submitting to it, right? Which is really fine. Let me explain to you. What I mean by that is that sometimes you can be in a situation where, okay, this thing is happening, there's nothing I can change. Let me accept it. Let me embrace that reality. But at the same time, this is where I want to be. This is where I want to go. So I'm guessing the difference in the fine line is that where is it that I put my energy? I'm accepting that even though I don't agree with it. And because I don't agree, I'm going to put my energy towards what I want. This is, in her case, this very fine line where power lies, even in situation that you can't control, because she's being put in a situation where she can't control. And this state of mind is going to make the difference between suffering an experience or learning from an experience, right? And for instance, people who are, some people can relate that. Let's imagine someone has a car accident and now they're being told, and this story has been, it's not been unheard of. They're being told by the doctor, oh, you will never walk, or you never be able to talk, he will never be able to talk anymore, whatever. And that person decided, you know what, that is not how the story is going to end. And they are in a state where they're accepting the reality, which is, right now I can't walk, I can't talk or whatever, but I'm fighting towards what I want. And in their mindset, it's a completely different because they're in a battle. And that is the place, once again, where you find the most power, right? Where you can go through anything at all because you're not just suffering what's happening, you are in a way reversing it and you're now learning it. So you, instead of having the situation on top of you, you become the person who is on top of the situation. This thing is not going to get me. And I think that in her case, this would have been the perfect fine line to find. Accepting it without submitting to it. Then, of course, there is forgiveness. And in her case, there's a lot of forgiveness. Also because it almost feels as though she has to do the forgiveness for some other people, right? And she could have done that, right? But obviously, like I said to you many times, it's very difficult in a short video like this to talk about forgiveness, right? It's a process, right? It is a process, but this is really, really the place where, as I have always said, and I will keep on saying, this is the moment where you have to show yourself the most compassion, because you have to decide for yourself, where do I want to go? Because remember, the job of a wound is never ever to heal itself, and it's not going to invite you, I think, I feel it now, let's forgive. No, because if something has happened and it's painful enough, forgiveness is not the first thing that comes in your mind. And in her situation, it's not surprising that forgiveness is not the first thing that comes in her mind. But this is the place where you have to constantly take back yourself. This is where I want to go. I want to forgive. Why? I do this for myself. This is also benevolence for yourself. So you see how all your posture are acting upon you, because benevolence is the act of being kind. And there's nothing kinder for yourself than letting go all of those negative experiences, not the negative experiences but the negative emotion that are connected to the experience is what I want to say. And that is a slow process, but if you are decisive about it, it's going to happen. That's it. Because remember, what people do is the best that they can do. That's it. And in her case, what her parents have done was the best with what they have. But you can either suffer that once again, or you can learn from that. She just suffered from that. I have to say that the story of Mary Tudor touched me a lot, and I wish that all parents and grandparents all around the world would be more aware of how important it is to work on healing your own wounds. Because it's hard enough to heal your wounds, but when it is the one from previous generation, the biggest difficulty that you have to face is that you have to be the healer of an experience that you don't own. In other words, you have the belief system and the defense mechanism of a situation that you have not experienced for yourself. I also wish that self-awareness and self-coaching was taught early on in life. It would have not prevented Mary from going through what she went through, but at least it would have given her the necessary tool to manage and deal with those experiences in a much more resourceful way. I hope you guys like this video, and that with each episode you are learning something more about how to apply the Osfour Self-Coaching Model into your own life. Next month's study case will be the famous and extraordinary Maria Callas, one of the most iconic diva singer of all time, in my opinion anyway, and her turbulent relationship with the business magnate Aristotle Onassis. But until next month, all I'm gonna say to you is peace, love, and light.